Karen calls 911 on black man changing his own Wi-Fi. But what the cops uncover shocks everyone. Just because a black man was standing in his own yard holding a phone, the police were called. But what awaited them was a secret that would shake the entire neighborhood. A gripping, dramatic story is unfolding. To continue, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any powerful, dramatic stories from Black Strength Stories. Brian Edna, 35 years old, was a software engineer with over 10 years of experience in cybersecurity. He lived alone at 1134 Hawthorne Street, in the quiet Crestwood neighborhood of Missouri, where most residents were white, middle-aged, and conservative. Brian wasn't an outgoing person. He worked remotely, usually only seen mowing the lawn, picking up the mail, or occasionally ordering from a restaurant 4 blocks away. To most of his neighbors, he was a polite shadow, quiet, self-sufficient, and uninvolved in anyone's private life. But to Astrid Foster, 58 years old, the woman who lived across from Brian, that silence was the problem. Since Brian moved in 3 years ago, she'd never seen him at any neighborhood BBQs, never registered at the local church, and never sent out Christmas cards. "There's something off," Astrid often told her friends. "Who lives in a community and acts like a ghost?" No evidence, no specific reason, just the biased instincts of someone used to an environment where different equated to dangerous. That Thursday afternoon, at 4:18 p.m., Brian had just wrapped up a long shift working on network security for a medical company in Boston. He noticed his Wi-Fi was behaving abnormally. His Zoom calls were freezing, emails were delayed, and smart devices in the house started losing connection. As a tech expert, he suspected someone might be accessing his private network without permission. He opened his router management app on his phone and saw an unfamiliar device named Crestwood-I01, a name clearly designed to look like it belonged to a local network hub. Without hesitation, Brian decided to disconnect all unrecognized devices, then stepped into his yard for a stronger signal to reset the password. He wore a faded gray t-shirt and sweatpants, standing beside the oak tree in front of his house, eyes focused on the screen, fingers moving quickly across his phone. From her second-floor window, Astrid saw the scene. Her mind immediately jumped to conclusions. What's he doing? Filming my house, hacking something. Everything inside her spiraled into a negative narrative. Black, secretive, antisocial, and now sneaking around in his own yard with an electronic device. There was nothing unusual, but she still felt she had to do something. At 4:24 p.m., Astrid called 911. "There's a man doing something very strange in his yard," she told the dispatcher. "I don't know what it is, but it looks suspicious. He's just standing there, looking around, and tapping his phone non-stop." "Is the suspect armed, ma'am?" the dispatcher asked. "I don't see anything, but I don't feel safe. He's black. I'm sure he's up to something." Just 4 minutes later, a Crestwood police patrol car arrived, lights flashing red and blue. 2 officers, Detective Ethan Alexander, 41, tall and stern, and Officer Ryder Alger, 33, quick and cautious, stepped out, hands hovering near their belts. What had been a quiet afternoon suddenly turned tense. Brian looked up, frowning slightly as the 2 officers approached his property. What is this? He wondered. But instead of reacting aggressively, he stayed calm. "What's going on, officers?" Brian asked, as Alexander motioned for him to stop. "We received a call about suspicious activity at this address," Alexander said, voice calm but cold. "What are you doing here?" Brian raised an eyebrow. "I live here. I'm resetting my Wi-Fi password." Alger stepped closer, scanning every detail around him. "Do you have any proof that you live here?" he asked. Brian looked at the mailbox by the yard, clearly labeled B. Edna. His car was parked right beside it, license plate registered to this address. "I've lived here for 3 years," he replied. "If needed, I can show you the deed." At that moment, Astrid came out of her house, arms crossed, voice sharp as a knife. "He's always out there doing something sneaky. I don't believe he's just changing a password. He's been standing there for almost 10 minutes. Brian tightened his grip on the phone, suppressing his anger. He knew that one wrong word, one flash of frustration, could spiral the situation out of control. But he also knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Just minutes ago, he was an ordinary man working from home. Now, he was a suspect under watch, just for fixing his Wi-Fi. And he didn't know. This was only the beginning. As the late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, what had seemed like a minor misunderstanding began to shift direction. Brian Edna, though under no obligation to prove anything, calmly raised his phone and said, "If you need to see it, I can show you the router settings." Detective Ethan Alexander and Officer Ryder Alger exchanged a brief glance, then nodded. Brian navigated through his phone, opening a home network management app, the kind only tech-savvy users handled with ease. Within a few taps, a list of connected devices appeared on the screen. Among familiar names like Brian's iPhone, office laptop, living room TV, one unfamiliar device stood out, Crestwood Huawei 01. Ryder frowned. "Is this one yours?" Brian shook his head. "Number Y only have 3 devices connected. I live alone, and I haven't shared my Wi-Fi password with anyone in over 2 years. Ethan asked again, "Have you ever used another device with that name? Or had someone else over recently?" Brian exhaled lightly. "No one else. I check my network monthly. That name showed up 2 days ago. I noticed the connection slowing down, so I checked and found it." Ryder leaned in to take a closer look. "This device is still active, and it has an internal IP address. Hold on." Brian led both officers inside. A neat, clean space, decorated in neutral tones, with numerous smart devices, motion-sensitive lighting, smart speakers, and security cameras all connected to a computer at his workstation. "I use a Nest system to manage the cameras around the house," Brian explained. "It logs every access attempt." He turned on the computer, logged into the management system, and cast the interface onto a large monitor. A complex dashboard appeared. MAC addresses, login times, connected devices, and bandwidth logs. Ethan furrowed his brow. "Can you filter by the IP address for Crestwood_I01? Brian did it in seconds. And then, the room fell silent. Crestwood I01 hadn't just accessed the Wi-Fi. It had accessed Brian's security cameras. "This is a viewer-level access," Brian said, his voice noticeably lower now. "It means someone has been watching me." Ryder scanned the logs. "This device logged into your cameras last night at 2:16 a.m., and it's still connected as we speak." Ethan's expression hardened. "This isn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. This is a high-level privacy breach. This is criminal, potentially prosecutable." Astrid Foster, still standing outside in the yard, had grown uneasy upon seeing the officers enter Brian's home. But after 15 minutes with no sign of them returning, she stepped closer to the fence and called out, "Is everything okay? Do you need more information from me?" Ethan stepped out of the house, his gaze colder than before. "No, ma'am. But do you know anyone in the area who might be using a network device named Crestwood_I01? Astrid frowned. "How would I know something like that? I'm not an engineer." "Then who around here is tech-savvy?" Ryder asked further. Astrid hesitated. "My nephew, Max Foster. He studies computer science at the State University. He's staying at my house for a few months over the summer." Brian heard the name from inside, His face went still. "Max Foster," he repeated. "He's here, isn't he?" Ethan looked at Astrid. She nodded, but stepped back, her eyes starting to waver. No way. Max wouldn't do something like that. He's a good kid. Brian didn't respond. He turned back to the screen, opened a nearby connection scanner. A stream of signals appeared. After a few quick actions, he pointed at one MAC address. "I just found Crestwood I-01 signal. It's broadcasting from a router about 100 feet away. That's directly across the street." Ethan clenched his fist. "If that's true, we need to speak to Max." Ryder signaled. "We'll call in the tech support unit. But if this turns out to be a spying system, the seriousness has already gone beyond a neighborhood matter." Brian stood up straight, eyes locked on the screen. "They've been watching me, but I think I'm not the only one." The room seemed to freeze as Brian dove deeper into the access logs of his security system. Lines of code, IP addresses, and timestamps danced across the screen like encrypted truths gradually being uncovered. Ethan Alexander and Ryder Alger, officers who had initially thought this was just a neighborly misunderstanding, now stood silent, watching each log entry appear. Brian scrolled through the IP addresses that had accessed his camera system in the past 72 hours. But what left him breathless wasn't the unfamiliar devices. It was a small icon that appeared in the upper left corner of the screen. Linked devices. 4 active streams. "Wait, I'm not the only one being watched," Brian said aloud. Ryder leaned in. "What do you mean?" "There are 4 live video streams running," Brian explained, navigating with his mouse to open another window. "I only have 3 cameras around my house. One of these isn't mine." With just a few clicks, the interface displayed an unfamiliar image. Not Brian's home. A narrow hallway, light gray carpet, a crooked floral painting, and a high-angle view from a ceiling-mounted camera. Brian recognized it instantly. This wasn't his house. Ethan gripped his belt strap tighter. "Can you identify whose house this is?" Brian silently switched to the second feed. A small living room, beige sofa, light blue painted walls. Then to a bedroom, purple floral curtains, a pillow embroidered with the word "Blessed." Astrid Foster, who had been standing near the door, saw the image on the large screen, her face going pale. "Oh my God, that's my bedroom," she whispered. Brian looked at her, his eyes no longer hostile, but filled with quiet empathy. "You see now? I wasn't the one who should have been suspected from the start." Astrid stepped back, mouth agape. She had nothing left to say, her eyes beginning to well up. Ethan said in a low voice, "If that's your camera, it means someone has accessed multiple household networks, possibly the entire neighborhood." Brian nodded. "I think this is a man-in-the-middle style cyber attack. The intruder creates a fake Wi-Fi access point with a name nearly identical to the real one, tricking home devices into connecting. From there, they collect data, even take control of IoT devices like cameras and smart speakers." Ryder asked, "Can you trace the signal source?" "I'll need some time." "About 20 minutes, Brian replied, eyes still fixed on the screen. He began analyzing packet data, cross-referencing MAC addresses with signal strength at different times. Simultaneously, he launched a Wi-Fi signal locator program. A diagram appeared, 7 Wi-Fi networks within a 150-foot radius. But only one signal was unnaturally strong and anomalous. Crestwood, Y01. "Looks like it's coming from house number 1842, Brian said, pointing at the miniature map. "About 3 houses down, southwest direction." Astrid suddenly gasped. "No, that's not possible." Ethan turned to her. "Whose house is that?" Her voice trembled. "That's my house." Ryder frowned. No, it's the one right behind yours, at the corner. Astrid froze. Her face changed color in an instant. Max. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Who's Max? My nephew. Max Foster. He's 22, studying computer engineering. He's been staying with me since June. Brian looked at Astrid silently. No more anger. Only a profound disappointment etched in his eyes. Ethan turned to Ryder. We need to talk to him. Right now. Astrid shook her head repeatedly. It can't be Max. He's respectful, hard-working. He wouldn't do something like this. Brian responded slowly, his voice low, and each word clear. The problem is, sometimes the ones who hide best are the ones we trust the most. The sky over Crestwood that afternoon was as heavy as Astrid Foster's mood when she led the police to her nephew's bedroom door. House number 1842 was no longer a quiet refuge for the aunt and nephew, but the epicenter of a serious privacy violation investigation. Detective Ethan Alexander knocked 3 times, each knock firm and steady like Astrid's pounding heartbeat. Max Foster, this is the Crestwood Police. We need to speak with you. There was a long pause before the lock clicked. The door slowly opened, revealing Max, 22 years old, disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, and dark circles beneath them like he hadn't slept in days. In his hand was a phone, its screen still lit, showing lines of code streaming down a black background. What is it? What's going on? Max asked, his voice shaky with tension. Ryder Alger stepped forward. We have evidence of unauthorized access to the Wi-Fi networks and security camera systems of several households in the area. Your devices are linked. Would you like to explain? Max swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward Astrid, who stood at the end of the hallway clutching her chest, her expression one of disbelief. There must be some mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Ethan kept a steely gaze. Then would you be willing to let us check your computer? Max hesitated. I have a right to privacy, don't I? Do you have a warrant? Ryder responded immediately. We can get one. But right now, this is your chance to clarify things before it gets worse. Max's eyes dropped, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of truth had just settled on them. All right, Max exhaled. I admit it. I created the Crestwood_I01 network. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It started as an experiment. A tech game, that's all. Astrid choked back words. Max, why didn't you say anything? How could you do this to the neighbors, to me? Max shook his head, not looking anyone in the eye. At first, I just wanted to see what I could do. Setting up a fake Wi-Fi network to lure in devices, it was easier than I thought. But then when I realized I could access their cameras... You felt powerful, didn't you? Ethan interrupted. No, it wasn't like that, Max weakly objected. It was just the feeling of control, knowing what people were doing, where they were, when they left the house. I didn't expect it to go this far. Ryder pulled out his notepad and wrote down everything. You're aware that every unauthorized access is a serious violation. The penalty can be up to 5 years in prison and tens of thousands in fines, not to mention civil liability. Max muttered. I'm just a computer engineering student. I didn't know the law was that strict. Astrid turned away, tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, she was no longer the cold neighbor who had called 911, but an aunt overwhelmed by the pain of betrayal and self-blame. I should have known, Astrid said through sobs. I suspected the wrong person, while the real threat was inside my own home. Ethan looked at Max, then said slowly, You'll have to face the consequences. But at least you still have the chance to cooperate. Max nodded silently. At the end of the hallway, Brian Edna's eyes peered through the slightly opened door. Not a gaze of victory, but one of solemn warning. He had once been labeled suspicious, had 911 called on him for resetting his Wi-Fi password. And now, the man who had been doubted was the one to expose a covert surveillance system, silently dismantling the neighborhood's safety. The scene the next morning in the Crestwood neighborhood was unlike any morning before. The sun hadn't fully risen when a local police patrol car pulled up in front of house number 1842. Max Foster, wearing a faded gray hoodie and sweatpants, was handcuffed, his wrists bound behind his back, and led away under the stunned and curious stares of the neighbors. The usual tranquility was shattered by the clinking of handcuffs and murmured conversations along the sidewalk. One neighbor exclaimed, "Isn't that Astrid's nephew?" He always seemed like such a good kid. Max was arrested on 2 main charges: unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance, both felonies under Missouri state law. If fully convicted, Max could face up to 7 years in prison and fines of up to $25,000. As Max was escorted to the police car, his eyes met Brian Edna's, who stood on the sidewalk with arms crossed. Max seemed like he wanted to say something but only let out a tired sigh. Astrid followed closely behind, almost running to catch up and speak to Brian. I'm truly sorry. I was so wrong." Brian looked at her, no longer with anger, but with a quiet disappointment. "I don't need an apology," he said firmly. "I need people like you to learn to stop judging others, just because they're quiet and their skin is a different color." After the incident, the story spread like wildfire across local forums. The Crestwood residents' Facebook group exploded with comments and shared posts covering the entire sequence of events. Within 48 hours, a post by resident Rachel L. titled "The Neighbor Wrongly Accused and the Shocking Truth About the Wi-Fi Network" had garnered nearly 9,000 reactions and over 600 shares. Many began to reflect on their own everyday behavior. How many times had they silently judged someone based solely on their walk, their skin color, or their silence? Some even wrote handwritten letters to Brian, thanking him for his patience and for not staying silent in the face of injustice. Astrid, who used to host weekend tea parties with the local women's group, now chose a different path. She began attending workshops on unconscious bias and microaggressions at the Crestwood Community Center. In one session, she shared, "I used to believe I wasn't prejudiced, but then I realized sometimes the most dangerous bias doesn't lie in our words. It lies in our silence." As for Brian, he became a featured speaker at tech events and privacy rights conferences. In a talk with cybersecurity students at the University of Missouri, he said, "Privacy isn't just a hacker's issue. It's about the right to live peacefully in your own home, without being watched, suspected, or accused without cause." Officers Ethan Alexander and Ryder Alger, thanks to their calm and professional approach, were praised by both their superiors and the community. At a press conference 3 days later, their department captain stated, "We're proud of the 2 officers who acted based on facts, not bias. The way they handled the case is a living example of modern justice in action." In the end, this story was not merely about the arrest of a young man who broke the law. It was an indictment of an unconscious system where a black man simply standing in his own yard could be perceived as a threat, and also a place where an old neighbor, once blind to her own prejudice, could become a symbol of change. 1 week after Max Foster's arrest, the Crestwood Community Center had no empty seats. More than 150 residents from neighboring streets gathered in the main hall to attend an unprecedented community meeting. From retirees to young parents, everyone carried with them a sense of curiosity, concern, and a genuine desire to understand what had really happened. The meeting was moderated by Rebecca Lynn, president of the Crestwood Residents Association, who began with a statement full of weight. We can't let silence continue to feed prejudice for even one more day. Brian Edna was invited to speak first. On the modest stage, under soft yellow lights, he didn't bring a prepared speech. He only brought the truth. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I want you to understand. Privacy isn't a privilege. It's a human right. His voice was steady, but his eyes bore the scars of emotional wounds. He recounted every detail, from the moment he detected the strange device to being suspected simply for standing in his own front yard. He presented the numbers. Over the course of 4 days, his network logged more than 300 unauthorized access attempts from the device, Crestwood I-01, including video segments from cameras in his living room, hallway, even his bedroom. When Brian emphasized the phrase, "the one being watched," became a suspect simply because of his skin color. The hall fell silent. Then came the unexpected. Astrid Foster requested to speak. Her face was pale, but her gaze was resolute. I used to think I was a fair person, but I was wrong. I asked the wrong questions. I judged the wrong person, and I regret it every time I look in the mirror. She turned to Brian and bowed her head. I'm sorry. Not because society expects me to apologize, but because my heart tells me I must. The room erupted in applause, not to condone her previous actions, but to honor the courage it takes to confront one's own mistakes. After the meeting, a group of residents, including Brian, proposed the formation of a neighborhood privacy watch organization aimed at increasing community awareness on network security and personal rights. A budget of $7,200 was raised in just 3 days to fund workshops led by tech experts and legal professionals. Crestwood High School didn't stay on the sidelines. Principal Michelle Torres announced, "We will incorporate this story into next semester's social ethics curriculum. Students need to understand that technology isn't just a tool, it's a boundary between right and wrong." From the police side, the Crestwood Police Department officially implemented a new training module, a 3-week bias-free situational response course, mandatory for all junior officers. Ethan Alexander and Ryder Alger, the 2 officers who handled the case, were commended for their calmness and fairness during the investigation. At the same time, the City Council launched a media campaign titled Faces of Crestwood, posting banners throughout the streets, featuring residents of different ethnicities and professions. Alongside the message, "We are neighbors, not suspects." The story didn't stop at the local level. 1 week later, Brian received a call from the national news outlet MSNBC. In a nationally televised interview, he shared, "Instead of asking, 'What is that person doing?' start by asking, 'Do I understand that person enough?'" It was from that interview that Brian was invited to join the City of St. Louis Cybersecurity and Civil Rights Advisory Council, representing the African American community. From one misunderstood action, a biased 911 call, and a personal misjudgment, Crestwood began its transformation, not through anger, but through awakening. The incident involving Brian Edna didn't just stop at being a community lesson. It quickly became the driving force for a long-term journey of restoration, not only for him, but for all of Crestwood. Looking beyond his personal injustice, Brian chose action over resentment. Less than 2 weeks after the community meeting, Brian launched his first class titled Protecting Yourself in the Digital Age, a free 6-session course for local residents. From elderly people unfamiliar with smartphones to tech-loving teens, the class attracted over 90 registrants in just the first 3 days. The curriculum included how to set strong passwords and secure personal networks, how to identify fake Wi-Fi signals, fake SSIDs, how to detect and avoid phishing scams, how to check your router logs for unfamiliar devices. State laws in Missouri related to digital privacy. He didn't do it alone. The nonprofit organization CyberSafe Homes and the Equal Code Group agreed to sponsor equipment, materials, and high-speed internet for the class. They also sent experts to co-teach with Brian in special sessions. What surprised everyone was that Astrid Foster, the woman who once called 911, signed up as a volunteer. She didn't hide her reasons when introducing herself to the class. "I'm here because I was once wrong, and I don't want anyone else to make the same mistake I did." That statement shifted many people's view of Astrid, from avoidance to empathy. Meanwhile, Max Foster, after being sentenced to house arrest, 200 hours of community service, and a mandatory course on tech ethics, also began to change. He wrote 12 handwritten apology letters to each household he had surveilled, including Brian, nearby neighbors, and an elderly woman named Edna Larson, whose health monitoring camera he had accessed. In his letter to Brian, Max wrote, "You didn't just catch me. You showed me boundaries. Without those boundaries, I would have gone too far, without ever realizing it. I'm sorry for the intrusion, and thank you for not responding with anger." The Foster family didn't stay silent either. They partnered with local schools to launch an after-school program called Technology and Responsibility, a recurring series of activities, including simulated network intrusions, ethical tech discussions, and guest speaker events with professionals. A neighborhood alert system was also created, using a simple app to notify residents when strange devices are detected on their Wi-Fi networks, or when suspicious activity, like someone scanning IP addresses repeatedly, occurs nearby. At the program's launch event, Mayor Lewis Garner stated, "If every mistake leads to a reform, then Crestwood is a blueprint for the rest of America." This wasn't just talk. The local government approved a $65,000 budget from the Educational Technology Fund to open programming, cybersecurity, and digital ethics classes for teens, with special focus on supporting students from Black and low-income communities. During the same period, the Brian Edna Scholarship Fund was established, seeded with an initial $28,000 donation from an anonymous entrepreneur. The fund would support Black students in the region pursuing fields related to technology, cyber law, or community education. Brian's story even inspired an independent film crew to create a documentary titled Signal Unseen, chronicling his journey through the lens of those who witnessed it firsthand. The film is set to premiere at the St. Louis Film Festival next year and is expected to become required viewing in social studies and technology courses across the country. And Brian? He continues teaching. Still opens his classroom doors every Tuesday and Friday evening. But now, when he looks into the room, he no longer just sees people wanting to learn how to protect themselves. He sees a community healing, a place that once doubted him, now calls him a guide. And one mistake, now the foundation for a generation that understands. Justice doesn't begin with judgment, but with understanding. We live in an age where technology can connect us all, but it also makes it easier to build invisible walls when bias still exists. The story of Brian Edna isn't just a warning about cybersecurity. It's a mirror reflecting how society judges people by their appearance. A single misunderstanding, an ungrounded phone call, can damage an innocent life and conceal far more serious threats. But from that injustice, Brian became a guiding light for his community through knowledge, composure, and faith in justice. So, when you meet someone different, will you react with fear or with understanding? When you hear something suspicious, will you rush to conclusions or pause to verify? Share this story if you believe the truth is always worth protecting. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Black Strength Stories so you never miss a powerful story, where truth, resilience, and justice always come first.